Welcome to Healthy Trust with holistic nutritionist and emotional eating coach Lily Aronin. This class on Bitachon, Trust in God, follows the classic workgate of trust. Walk with us as we enter, as Davis Psalms called it, the Tower of Divine Protectio, and pull up a seat.
Really amazing the time that we're living in right now. Every single thing that's happening personally, professionally, globally, in our homes is bringing us to a greater state of bitachon. And it's like we're in the gym 24/7. We're really preparing for that like wedding with God, right? Like we want the dress to fit, we want to look good in our bitachon, we want to be in a good place. We're super focused. What's also interesting is that Rabbanit Yamima Mizrahi, who's a very famous Rabbanit here in Israel, had a beautiful thing she sent out before Shabbat about, it says that Hashem heard the crying out of the people. And he saw that there was a lack of shalom bayis in the home, the problems in the home, and the blessings of the children. And what does that mean? Well, if you imagine that you were in their position and each woman, every baby was having 6 tuplets, okay? 6 tuplets, and they're in slavery, and there's all this external stress, and there are babies dying and being thrown in the walls and in the yaor, and there's trauma everywhere. It says it affected the relationships between husbands and wives. Like, duh, right? But it's so nice for someone to validate that that's true and that's a real thing. And that having so many kids underfoot and the life expectancy being crazy created also all of this tension and pain. And it was not just the global situation that made the nation cry out finally to Hashem. Part of them accepted that. This is something we're going to have to go through. This is supposed to be hard, But the personal struggle was what finally motivated them to cry out. And it says that Hashem, in hard times, sees every personal struggle. He isn't only in this global, magnificent miracle we're experiencing. In this global, magnificent miracle are people stuck at home with their kids and all the things and the money for Pesach and all of these issues and all of this stuff. And so what is Shabbat HaGadol that we just experienced? That was when Hashem heard this great cry. The great cry wasn't the global events. The great cry was the personal suffering. And that's what he answers. And that's why Shabbos HaGadol is supposed to also open up this blessing conduit for all of those personal things, like the personal amount of money that Pesach always costs so much money and all of these things. And it's just, I thought, really beautiful. And also a really feminine, beautiful perspective that while very often the masculine is focused on the global picture, the feminine cares about each and every child, like, it's the mother versus the father. The father's out there slaying the dragon, but the mother's the one at home dealing with the trauma of the kids who hear the dragon. You know, just now, we literally just got out of the mamad, and there was a big, they call it here a nefila, like a big piece fell and exploded in between the 2 yeshuvim right here. And my son all of a sudden is worried because my daughter says it out loud. And then my son's worried, well, what about my friends? Where was it exactly? And like, calm down. But again, every one of those moments is a memory. My dog has serious PTSD. My dog, every time she hears the hatra'ah, is shaking, like worse than the people. And we have to put on for her meditation. She follows me around.
Remind me to give you a tool for the dog after.
Oh, so anyway, she listens to my meditation, and I'm meditating out loud, and kind of like we have picked up her meditating with me, and I said, at least I'm influencing someone. And then we put on for her like literally those like sounds that's like different things when we're in
I was going to say, very simple if anyone's listening, humming. Just hold a dog and humming, and it co-regulates your heart and the dog's heart.
Yeah,
I've tried it and it really works. Yeah,
so it's just really funny and interesting, but true and difficult, and all of the things all together. So what does that have to do with today? Today, we're perfectly in this right spot of the 5th introduction addresses why, in contrast to animals, whose needs are readily available to them, a person is required to make great efforts to obtain his livelihood and other needs. A person should clearly see that the completion of all the matters that come to be in this world after its creation come in one of two ways. One is they come solely due to the decrees of the Creator, his desire that these things should immediately come into existence. And this again reminds me about our hostages. And when we finally got them home, in the end, it really wasn't something we did, and it wasn't something Trump did. It just was the moment that God decided, today, everybody's coming home today, because we prayed and we negotiated and we did all these things and we got some, like, it just wasn't the end. It wasn't the end until the exact day and the exact time that Hashem said, now. This whole thing started. We were all knowing something was going to start until the exact moment. There wasn't something specific. We are on page 80 at the top of the page. So there are things that, yes, there's stuff going on, but there's no like, this was the bullet, right? When you learn American history, they're like, and this battle started this whole thing of things that happened. Here we see we're living in a time where there's very clearly things that Hashem decided in this moment, this is what's happening. We don't know why. He's brought it fully into existence. We also see in our life something all of a sudden is there and that it's not there, and then something is there that wasn't there, and then it's gone. I had back pain for 2 days. I didn't do anything to create the back pain. And while I tried lots of things to make it go away, none of them really worked until magically I just noticed it was gone. It wasn't like after I did something specific. God gave it to me, God took it away. But there are also things that come through means and intermediaries. And some of them are remote, meaning it's like 5 intermediaries away from the result. And some of them are immediate. I give you this. I show up with dinner, right? Versus I gave you a job and then you had enough money and then you used the money to buy groceries and then you used the groceries to cook the dinner. I still gave you the money for the dinner because I gave you the job, but that's remote. Versus I showed up with dinner prepared for you. That's immediate. Some of them are remote, meaning so far back is Hashem's hand, we don't even see it. And some of them are revealed. Like, oh, we clearly see how Hashem brought this into being for me. Wow. And some of them are hidden. We know that this came through people, but we really don't know why Hashem did this or how he brought this miracle to us or why or how or, all the things behind. And this is especially true, it says in the Haggadah, where we talk about our enemies constantly rising up against us, that a lot of the things that Hashem has saved us from, we see. But a lot of the things are hidden because those plans never even came to fruition. And they're hidden from us, those good things that happened. We don't know the car accidents we didn't get into, all of the things that we're saved from and the good that's come to us, where we just see this good thing showed up, the sunny day. We don't see the clouds and the precipitation and all the things that had to happen so that we could have a sunny day today, on our wedding day, or on whatever, that day where you really feel like, this isn't just a sunny day, this is for me. I needed this day. Okay. A person is required, okay. Now, all of them hasten to complete that which God has decreed should be, and the exact way they should appear, and God helps them accomplish this, because we can't accomplish and actually get an outcome without God's help. So God puts into the world, and now everybody in the universe rises up and feels this energy, this pull to do this thing. Have we all experienced that, where all of a sudden you feel this strong pull to show up somewhere, to be somewhere, to do something, right? We all are moved by the will of God. A person is required to know that while everything comes from God, there are some things that God decreed should immediately come to be without any further action necessary. And while there are things that God decided should come to be through various means. We're on page 81. An example of an immediate cause would be the drawing of water from the depths of the earth by means of the pulley and the jug tied to it, right? A pulley system. You pull, the thing rises, the water's in, it comes out. Great. If you tie an animal to it, now there's one more step, right? Now you have to have an animal. You got to bring the animal, you got to tie the animal. Now the animal's moving. And then if we really think about it, there are the causes that are between us and the water coming out. we had the animal, the wheels, the rope, right? The pulley. Without it, we actually would never get the water. In our mind, we just see, oh, I use the pulley to get the water. Now think about that about your human body. Your body is the pulley system. The fact that your muscles and tendons move the bones to reach, to move your hand, like give yourself a hug right now. Okay, give yourself a hug. Physically give yourself a hug. In order to give yourself this hug, you had to have a thought that had to have an impulse, that had to move your body, that had to move your muscles, that had to move your nerves, that had to do this. Now feel your hands touching your body. Bring your attention. That energy, that feeling has to travel along your body, through your brain, and now be transmitted into sensation that your brain understands and can name. All of that is by Hashem's divine will being created all the time. If any one of these things wasn't working, we would not be able to do what we need to do every single day. Give ourselves a hug, pick up a cup and drink, see our way to the bathroom, drive a car. This is one of the most profound reasons to really, really, really care and appreciate and live in gratitude with our body, especially when aesthetically or health-wise, our body may not be in 100% perfect condition. Because we're focusing on probably the 3% that isn't perfect and isn't healthy and isn't working exactly the way we want it to, instead of the 97% that is. And when we treat our body like it's 97% doing everything we want it to do, and we care and nurture and cleave to that gratitude and peace, we're going to sometimes see that the stuff we don't like, maybe the way our blood sugar is, maybe the way our hormones are releasing more cortisol than we'd like right now, maybe the way our stomach is, or this, or our lack of strength, has a lot to do with what we're putting in and our care of our body, and our body's still doing the best it can. And now we have a whole different conversation is, now how can I nurture that body? How can I care even for the pieces that are trying their best under very difficult circumstances? And that's where that inner child work comes in, where you have that strong, capable part of yourself that has all the tools and has all the resources and the ability to use them, which is the whole part of our body that's working exactly the way we want it to. And the whole part of our body that isn't always working exactly how we want it to, or looking exactly how we want it to, that's our body doing the best it can with the resources and effort and time and circumstances it's being given. And when we include Hashem and we say, Hashem, please help me care for that part of myself, then we're going to have a much more blessed outcome, even when things aren't perfect. The same way we eat matzah and not chametz on Pesach. Matzah acknowledges the state of imperfection. It acknowledges the state of imperfection and the gratitude for that state of imperfection, and yet it's called matzah, that it finds the, I forgot the exact Hebrew word, but I heard this today on a thing on the Haggadah from Rabbi London, that it is to the exact point that the rest of the time chametz, it's like everything is blown up. It's really hard to get to that exact point that needs fixing, right? When there's so much inflammation in the body, it's really hard to find where the actual problem is that needs healing. But matzah is in that area where you are stuck in between, where you are in lechem oni, when you are in really a tight space. You have Pesach, it opens it up, and for Pesach, We have the matzah, which really is going to touch on the exact vulnerable places where we are in the limits, where we're in the makom tsar, and help us find inside of that the exact place of healing.
That's beautiful. So is like matzah compared to like matzah to find? I mean, it's a different letters, but is that what the analogy is? It's ironic, isn't it, that matzah is the one that causes all the inflammation, though.
At all. Like anything that we ever have, especially if you have real like matzah that's handmade or that's made by a machine, that's the real ingredients, it's just flour and water. That's all it is. You know, if you eat anything else with flour and water, the problem is dehydration. You need to drink 8 ounces of water for every half piece of matzah, or 1 tablespoon of matzah meal should you cook with that. That's the big problem. And the potato starch. Use almond flour, don't use potato starch wherever possible. But putting that aside, for the just 2 little, health nutrition tips for Pesach, it's also the only one that's 3. Everything else in the Seder is 4. And the matzah is the only thing that's 3 that's about in the spaces that are incomplete, in the things that aren't exactly how we want them, in the space of the 20% that's really difficult. And acknowledging that everything else at the Seder is the state of 4, the state of completion, the state of perfection. But we have to be grateful. We have to recognize.
Lily, that is 3 fathers and 4 mothers. Is that related as well?
But you could definitely make a, Shulamit's idea that the 3 fathers are, the 3 fathers were not complete because they had the 12 tribes, right? But the 4 mothers were complete because then we have like a big gap of time before we really hear, other than Tamar, who married Yehuda, and Osnat, that married Yosef, where we have Mashiach from Yosef and Mashiach ben Yehuda. Only those 2 lines of Mashiach is the wife of the Shevet mentioned, which is very interesting. And do we know about who it was? Very, very interesting as well. Okay. We are on page 81. Similarly, for the other actions that come to be, they do not come as a result of people's actions or through any other entity. Rather, they exist due to the decree of God and his preparation of the means through which the action will be completed. To him, all the causes have been counted. God has counted and put into place all of the causes, even if one were to be lacking, the end result would not come into being. The other verses are quoted that the state that God is in the one who pulls all the causes into place. And this is also something really important, because a lot of times we're like, I don't like this thing. I don't want this problem. I don't like this circumstance. And when we say that, we might be saying, I actually don't want this part, but I can't get to the good final outcome without all of these exact causes. If even one was missing, we wouldn't achieve the outcome. This difficult thing that I have to deal with is not by accident. It's not extra. It's an exact recipe for the end good outcome. And when you bake, you have to add some of the salt to bring out the sweetness. And you have to have this balance of ingredients, of the acid and the base and all of these things, why baking is chemistry, to create the best outcome. We're moving to page 82. As it says in Yirmiyahu, who is the great counsel and the master in carrying it out? And in Malachim, for it was something brought about by the Lord. If the means were all lacking, then nothing would come to be as a result of just the natural activities. Proof that human intervention is very often needed, page 82. When we contemplate a person's needs and how he is required to engage in various means and to exert himself in order to obtain his needs, then we will clearly observe this to be the case. That without the various means, the matter would not come into actuality, right? If you don't have a job, you're not necessarily going to have money to buy the food. If you don't go shopping, you're not necessarily going to have the food. If you don't then cook the food that you shop for, you're not going to have the meal, right? Pesach is a lot of preparation. There's a lot of cleaning. There's a lot of logistics. There's a lot of partnership between us and God to get to Seder. for when someone needs food, even if the food is placed in front of you in a state ready and fit to eat. If you don't exert yourself to eat it by raising it to your mouth and chewing, he will not satiate his hunger. Similarly, someone who is thirsty and in need of water will need to raise the water to his mouth to drink. All the more so if effort is necessary and the food is not ready for you to eat, so that you're required to exert yourself to prepare it by grinding the flour, kneading the dough, baking the dough into matzah. More exertion than this will be necessary if it's even more difficult if he needs to buy it as well as prepare it. And even more exertion than this will be necessary if he lacks the money with which to buy the food, in which case he will need far greater exertion and involvement in the various means than which has been mentioned earlier. For then he will be required to hire himself out for work or to sell some objects and possessions and the like. And you see that he's saying here, none of this is a punishment. All of this is on purpose. It's not a punishment to have to work. It's how much participation do I get to participate in with the Lord, the divine creator of the entire universe today. Today is everything put in front of me, and I need to use it, and I need to receive it, and I need to consume it, and I need to be satisfied from it, which is also something I need to do. Or is today 2 steps away? Today I need to cook. There's ingredients. Today there's no food in the house. Today I need to. But you see, we always think about it from the opposite perspective. We think every single day I need to get up and create everything from scratch. Every day I have to go to work, and every day I have to earn all the money, and every day I have to then make the bread, and we're overwhelmed. We're not paying attention to the present moment. What do I actually have to do right now? Is today earning? Is today consuming? Is today preparing? Is today a little bit of everything? But really, look how much I already have. Look how many possessions I already have. That yes, I have to sell one to get the money for the bread, but I already had the possession in my thing. And as much as I need to eat the food, Hashem is actually taking care of that my digestive system works, right? Hashem is the one taking care of that my body's now going to excrete what's not needed. Hashem is the one taking care of that I have the intellect to have a job or the time to have a job. Like, we're doing the really surface level stuff. All of the facilitating is still happening by God. The same way the person who attaches the ox to the entire system to draw the water forgets that God had to grow the tree for him to have the wood, to create the pulley, to create the intellect, to have the wheel, to create the rope. Like, all of those things got to put into place. Yes, we attached it. We assemble things. But like, we're really not on our own. Because if we were on our own, we couldn't do anything. Where does this land for you? Let's pause here. This is like a really good place to pause, and we'll keep going with whatever time we have. Thoughts?
So I really like the idea that we assemble what Hashem provides. I think that's really powerful.
It's so much less fraught when we think about it like that. I have to eat well. I'm just assembling the food that God provided into a form that's good for the body, that he provided, that he's handling all the complicated stuff. Okay, I need to assemble some communication between me and this other human being, but Hashem is the one who's actually creating all of the special things about the two of us that really in the end will work if we just focus on like calming it down, right? I just need to assemble some sort of system to clean for Passover. I just need to assemble some sort of Seder for the Seder, right? What is the idea of Seder? Seder is assembly. It's just making order of all the things that are already given to you. Should we go, or anybody still sitting with that and needs a minute? Continue? Yeah.
No, I'm between listening for sirens and seeing if I can sit down again.
Oh, okay. You unmuted, so I thought you had something to say.
I was, but I forgot what it was. I'm just listening now.
Okay. The reason for human effort, and now we're on the bottom of 83. Having elaborated upon the fact that a person is often required to exert himself in order to obtain his livelihood and other needs through various means, the author continues to explain why God orchestrated it so. Why did he not orchestrate it that everything is just already available to us? There are two reasons why the Creator obligated us to make effort to pursue and search for a means for our livelihood and other needs, and to be active participants. The first reason is that God in his wisdom decided to test us as to whether we will choose to be with God or to rebel against him. Therefore, he tested us in a manner through which the path which he chooses will be evident. God did this by causing us to be needy and lacking, which is outside of him, be it food, drink, clothing, shelter, cohabitation. And then he told us to pursue them and obtain them through means that he prepared for us, but only through manners and means at certain times. And I know some people get very upset that Hashem is testing us. Some people don't care. They're like, of course, tests are normal. They don't have any resistance. Many people do feel like, isn't life hard enough? Why do there have to be so many tests? Okay. What is this idea of a test? Shechiba chachma bichinat hanefesh. A bichinat hanefesh is translated in English as a test, a mivchan, but it really comes from the word to sift, to sift. Hashem is putting all of the means of the world into our vessel. And he's saying there's treasure in here. There is something that you need that you don't have, because I've created in you this lack. And the thing that you need is here. But you now have to sift. And you can decide to sift using the Torah, using my divine will to find the treasure. Or you can do it another way. And if you do it that other way, you're choosing to not sift Hashem's will from the complexity of the world. You're choosing to dump it out and make a mess and find the treasure, or not find it, that you would have gotten for sure in the right way at the right time. And if you didn't have it in the right way at the right time to your level of reasoning, it's because it's waiting for you in the greater sifter, and you need to keep pulling down and bringing more, like you got to keep going in, right? He said there are times where it's going to be that first, if you imagine when they were sifting for gold in the gold rush, like I'm aging myself now from California, that we learned about this in history class, right? Or you've ever gone to like an archaeological dig, you don't know how many things of dirt you're going to sift till you find that amazing thing. And the really amazing archaeologists have that infinite patience, right? They know for sure they're going to make a discovery one day at one place in one time. This dig, another dig, some other dig. But the experience is amazing the whole way through because they have that certainty, right? And we could look at life through that. The treasure's all going to be there. We're just like in the sifting. That's what a test is. To sift God's will amid all the noise and the dust and the salt and the experience. We are instructed to pursue the means with which to obtain our livelihood and other needs. And at the same time, we were given this Torah, which tells us that only some of those means are permitted. For example, when it comes to planting, you're not allowed to plant forbidden mixtures and species together. When it comes to where we live, when it comes to certain mitzvot, when it comes to mezuzah, right? Mezuzah from the Haggadah, from Pesach. Why do we have a mezuzah on the door? Because we put the blood on the mezuzah. From this experience, does every Jew have a mezuzah on their door? Those things that the Creator decreed that a person will obtain, he will only obtain them because God put them in the sifter, made them available to him, and made the means of getting them available. Well, those things that God did not decree that we get, he will not obtain because either those means or the thing will be withheld from him. As a result, it will become clear if he wishes to serve God or disobey him, based on his choice of the means with which he uses to obtain his needs. On account of this, he will either be rewarded or punished, even if he did not end up obtaining that which he tried to obtain. And let's look at that in the Hebrew. Vinit boreru, which means it will be clarified. Mimeno ha'avoda v'havera b'kavana. It's not just his choice, but his intentions. Ubebichira, his freedom of choice. Le'echat mehena mibilti ha'acheret. V'hitchayev achar zeh hagmul v'ha'onesh. Gemul is what they're using to say reward. Remember, we use that word to describe the cleaving to Hashem of a nursing baby to its mother. When we choose to sift and do things, we are suckling on Hashem. We are having our needs met in the most perfect, right way, the same way the mother's milk is made perfectly for the baby. But enosh also comes and is related to the words for chaos. So we translate that as punishment. But it's the opposite of this beautiful nursing milk. It's this chaos. And yeah, chaos feels like a punishment. Afilu lo gamar behem hamaseh. Because even if we didn't end up getting the thing we wanted, but we were chaotic and we didn't follow Hashem's will, we're creating that chaos and we're going to experience the consequences of the chaos. The Hasheni, the second reason why God deemed that people be required to exert effort and employ various means to obtain their livelihood, is that if a person didn't need to exert effort to pursue and search for the means of his livelihood, he would rebel and pursue that which is forbidden. And he would not heed his obligations toward God in exchange for the kindness of God towards him. And here I want to also read this in Hebrew. V'haya bo'et, v'rodef acher ha'averot, v'lo haya mashkiach al ma shehu chayav bo. Mashkiach means to, right? Like a mashkiach is the person who guards the kashrut. Mashkiach means to be that guardian who we talk about later when we talk about what kind of watchkeeper are you? Are you doing it only because you're paid? Are you doing it only because you have such an amazing connection with the person whose stuff you're watching that you're doing it out of love? You decide what kind of watchman you are. Are you in a transactional relationship with God or are you on a deeper relationship? It's all some form of hashgacha. It's all some form of this relationship. But it's up to you whether that's a transactional relationship or not. Al ma shehu chayav bo. And yes, we owe God. We owe God. Why? Because we were created with a purpose. Thank God we have meaning and purpose in our life. Otherwise, we would be here for randomness. Al tovat Elokim elav. We have meaning and purpose because God is constantly bestowing good upon us. Why is he giving us the trees and the water and the body and the soul so that we can use the ox to tie it to the rope, to use it into a stick, to get the water to make the world a better place? So if he's giving us all this good and we have no meaning and purpose with which to do with that good, the whole world has no purpose. We have a purpose, we have a chiyuv, we have an obligation because of the good. If there was no good in the world, then we wouldn't have anything we need to use for that meaning and purpose, to be mashkiach, to be the guardian, of turning that good into some amazing outcome that we're all going to experience together. And now he quotes from Isaiah, and there was a harp and a lute and a tambourine and a flute and wine at the drinking, and the work of the Lord they did not regard, and the deed of his hands they have not seen. And you have this part in history. And at the beginning, right after Adam HaRishon was sinned, you have these generations where they discovered musical instruments, and they had all of this insane creation and creativity and amazing energy that came into the world, but they used it for idol worship. And then the same thing later happened to the Jews in the time of Isaiah. They had money and culture and art and history, and instead of using it to serve God, they didn't see that God's the one who created that energy in the world. They didn't see that this all was good of God, that then they had an obligation to use for meaning and purpose. Similarly, it says, and Yerushan became fat and rebelled, and you grew fat and thick and plump, and Israel forsook the God who made them. And it's the difference between seeing our food and our wealth and our material desires and needs and passions as a means to an end versus only for their own pleasure. And it's also where fat shaming comes from on a Jewish level. Now we need to remember not to do it to people, but to have this sense of there's like a deep psychological point of why it is just a proven psychological fact that when we see ourselves struggling with our weight, or we see someone else struggling with our weight, intuitively we know something is wrong. Not something's wrong with them, that they're broken or this, something is off. Something is off in the nature of the world. Something is off with this person. Something is off. It doesn't mean that they're bad or evil or that we are when we are struggling with our weight. But he uses these words very clearly throughout the entire Torah, again and again and again and again, so that we have a deep association with over pleasuring ourselves with all physical pleasures, whether they're sex or material possessions or food or money, and to understand that we have to have moderation in all of these things. And that's why on the Korban, on the Mizbeach, we burn the fat and the blood. The fat representing the disciplining of all of our desires for meaning and purpose and enjoyment. And the blood is our passions, the things that we care about so deeply, intellectually, emotionally, physically, that even we have to discipline our mind. And this is a thing for every political spectrum, has truth and passion and the best intentions. And all of it has to be disciplined or it goes crazy. And we have to remember that passions run amok. We lose the truth. It all, in the end, requires discipline and requires being adjusted and sifted to that meaning and purpose. And that's on every single place in the spectrum and every single human being. And this is a divine struggle. We will all struggle with this. If you struggle with this, welcome to the club. I'm here too. Anybody have a question on that? Something sink in, something you feel like, no, I totally disagree with that. I don't want to like run over anybody who has like an alternative perspective. Anybody have anything they want to share? Okay. We're on the bottom of page 80.
Sorry,
Please go ahead.
I was looking for my I was cleaning my oven. So I went to a shiur yesterday that was so poignant, and it's to this point, so I just want to share it. So I'm not disagreeing. What I'm saying is this rabbi he said, you know, we do so many things right. we are machmir when it comes to tzedakah. We do this, we do that, taharas mishpacha, a lot of us, whatever. Just all these things that have clear-cut halachot or, uh, just in Shulchan Aruch or whatever, we're very, okay, it's the in-between stuff. It's the gray where we are lacking. It's in those gray areas where there's nothing written down. There's nothing written down. How many l'chaim should you have at a kiddush? Should it be 1, 2, 10? What's enough? What should you have? Should you have, in terms of eating, in terms of sexual behavior? I mean, he went through the gamut of different, areas where nothing's written down. And he pointed to all the Sfarim in the Shul. He's like, there's so much in our lives that we don't have written down. Yet there's a right and a wrong. And what Hashem wants us to do, he said, is not just listen to this is what you should do, this is what you should not do, but rather in those gray areas, what would I want you to do? What would Hashem want you to do? And that's where we, like you're saying, we struggle, because it's not clearly defined, but that we all could be doing, a better job of having 2 l'chaims. That's it. 2 l'chaims is the max. And I was like, wow, that was really cool. And then he said something very interesting that I didn't even know, because I guess it hit right before COVID in February of 2020, where all the Rebbeim in Chicago had gotten together. I guess, that's when pot was legalized. I don't even remember when pot was legalized, marijuana. Or whatever you call it today. I'm
Right.
showing my age. Sorry. He's like, we all got together and we wrote up, that it's wrong. That it's against halacha or not against halacha. I don't know exactly what he said, but he said something. I have to ask him again exactly what the Rebbeim said, but I was like, oh, very interesting. That's not written down anywhere, but yet
And
people are doing it.
right. And it's an opinion, right? So that's one opinion. You have people with cancer, you have people with PTSD, where it's being used, in all kinds of situations and ways. But to say like, hey, just for your fun, recreational use,
Right.
we at this moment are saying and again, I love all the rabbis, and to all the kavod of the rabbis, and I'm not personally a marijuana user, but I want to say also that for anybody who's listening to this, that to each person, you have to take that generation of rabbis who's speaking to their generation, and I'd be interested to hear 10 years from now whether the rabbis are going to say the same thing or not, versus pre-COVID, where we're using it in a very destructive, like also alcohol. I mean, do you remember that there was not a single, you couldn't watch a single show without 18, commercials for scotch and whiskey, during COVID, like they were pushing hard on this drugs and alcohol, to get through the day experience. So for anybody who is into recreational use, speak to your local Orthodox rabbi about your situation and hear the message behind it, which is this is something that requires differentiation.
Differentiation. That's right. Discernment. And I'm just going to say one more thing.
Yeah.
He said, in terms, he said that. He said, be willing to have discernment. There's 3 stages. Be willing to have discernment, have the knowledge to know how to have discernment, and then have discernment.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, that was cool. Great.
I think that's true. I think there's definitely a need to have willingness to have discernment. A lot of us have an area of life where we feel like I'm not willing to discern in this area.
Right.
Dad?
Well, I was going to say in Colorado, where it all first began, my Chabad rabbi actually koshers the flour, and you walk in, you can see what has been kosher, and this is obviously just the plant, but also there's many things in the Torah where they are burning acacia, which is they've now considered it's a, made them probably very high into a very high spiritual level. And so I think it's fascinating. I think the discernment part is more each person taking responsibility for themselves than in such a way, because it's very hard, because if you can go back and see a lot of things through the Torah lens of using natural elements to help you reach a mystical spiritual place, different than everyday obvious
Exactly.
use, but it's the discernment
Yeah.
of which you can't write on the be afraid of or be aware of or health, or it could be perfectly it's a natural, there's no processing of the whatever, the flower part of it. So it's interesting
Yeah.
that I think it can go so many different ways, but the discernment factor, the sifting that you were talking about, I found the sifting part really interesting that you say, because I think to myself, like, okay, if I go back and I think about who I was 10 years ago,
Mhm.
and it's you hate that when you're younger and somebody says to you, oh, don't worry, when you get to 40, you won't care so much. When you get to 50, you really won't. When you get to 60, you really won't. And I think it's so interesting to look back, and when you say, oh, I'll talk to my younger self or whatever, that sifting process that's happened during all of that time is I mean, it's incredible. It's like fascinating how you can sit with, and the knowledge that holds you more stable, you become more steady. All of those things isn't that anything specifically happened whatsoever. And it's the discernment and the sifting and all of that that makes life very, very different. And when you think about people who tell stories about just before they pass, what really was important to them. They always have this kind of miraculous, like, wow, that's so easy. Why did it take me 20 years, 30 years, 40 years to get to the concept of simplicity and need what I needed, Um,
Yeah. It's really interesting, and it's interesting because, the Gemara talks about getting married young, and really pushes people to get married young. And you see in the more religious communities or more traditional communities, people are pushed to get married young. And it's really interesting because I have a son who's 21 and I got married at 19. 19. I can't even imagine my daughter's 18 getting married next year, that she's mature enough or whatever. But it's interesting to me when I think about it from a certain perspective of the younger we are, the more sifting we need to do. Right? Like stuff, it's just, and the holes are just smaller, like it's just bigger, and like we're just missing stuff. But the desires and the lack of clarity is the greatest when we're youngest. And it's interesting that that's when God, who gives us the most desires, also wants us in these committed, disciplined relationships that are going to force us to make those sifters smaller and smaller and smaller, to like, they narrow you. When you commit to one human being young, you are narrowed. Your life experience is more narrow. But if the point isn't to have the widest range of experience and the point is to sift, then that narrowing is really important. And it doesn't happen for everybody. Not everybody's blessed to get married young, and not, even if they want to. And it's not always best for everybody. Like, again, that's God's individual divination to each person. But as on one hand, that modern thinking person inside of me is like, oh my God, what was I thinking? What were my parents thinking? On the other hand, living through that, the discernment and the things you go through together, you have your family young, you have your children young, and all these things, and physically all of these things, there's this balance between all of this responsibility and all of this passion and taiva and physicality that's when you're young to when you're older. And those things do also soften, not only from age, but from time. And I think that's a really interesting thing that you brought up. This idea of naturally things narrow as we get older, but at the same time, we're at the most danger when everything is wide open to us, And that's what the Torah is always doing. Food is wide open to us. And it's saying, now I'm giving you this more narrow experience than the rest of the world is getting. You have limited, you can only eat these pure animals. And you can't eat meat and milk together. And you can't work on Saturday. So no, like you have less opportunity than somebody else. But is that to our detriment, or is that to our benefit that we get to skip ahead and be ahead of the curve in discernment? And don't you see that also kind of in our thinking intellectually, in our always holding ourselves to that higher moral standard, a generation or two before the rest of the world is progressing to that space of, well, we've been sifting longer. I don't know, I'm just sitting with that for a minute. Stacey.
I just think you're right on. I have always said that. You know, when it's like I've said that before. Like when I go shopping, it makes it easier for me to go in the store because it narrows, because there's so many choices what food to buy. And when I can only purchase kosher food, it's like, oh, thank you. At least I'm more narrow now. And I'm like, I don't have so many choices. It makes it easier. It's an ease. It's actually makes it easier. Now, some people can see the opposite perspective. It makes it harder. And there are times where you can't find that product that's kosher, but then you have to get more creative, which forces you into a different aspect. How do I create that thing in a kosher way? Which I love to do. You know, because I like ethnic foods, you know, because I wasn't always kosher. So I know it's out there and I want that taste again, you know. Anyway, it's very interesting. It's really cool.
Mm-hmm. Shulamit, you look like you have something maybe to share?
Well, I mean, it's not necessarily on track, but I was going to say you can always consult me because I was also not always religious, and I'm an expert at recreating all the flavors that I've learned and making them kosher. So I love experimentation and I love spices and cooking. So
Okay.
I know it shouldn't be, I don't know if it's a right thing to say, but it's almost like I'm happy in a way that I wasn't always kosher because now I know how to make things like taste a certain way that I never would have known. It's really weird. Maybe I shouldn't say that. Maybe that's not a right thing to say, but I wouldn't eat it anymore. But at least, you know, because the knowledge of all the different wisdoms and generate also the health and the culture of how to cook with spices in the winter and the summer, especially when I traveled in India. Actually, a lot of the stuff I learned in India was kosher. Sorry, I'm half in, half out of this meeting because sirens and neighbors knocking, but I'm going to rewatch this whole thing because it's so interesting.
Thank you. And I don't think you should ever be like, my dad was a ballet troupe and he talked about how he never got the taste of IHOP again, but like it stayed with him his whole life, IHOP, for some reason. But like, I think it gave him appreciation. Like like they say that no person can stand in the same space of a person, you know, who is the Gayer or Bala Tshuva. Like they get to stand in a really unique, cool place that you get to respect and you get to be like, wow.
We're all ballet tshuva to a certain degree, and we keep, it's a continuous process, isn't it? It's not like one and done.
Absolutely.
You have to keep coming back to it and remeasuring and recalibrating where I am, especially different circumstances in life and different, surrounded by different, you know, you take it for granted when I'm living in a frum community, everything is a certain way. And here I've got to scrutinize every packet, like of sweets, and like, does it have this in and that in? Like in America, it's easy OU, and in Yerushalayim, it's easy. Everything in the kosher shop's kosher. But up in the north, you don't know what to take for granted, and you know, master on the fruits and all these things. It's a bit of a struggle, honestly. I'm looking for a rabbi that I could consult, but I don't know if there's you know, that's one of my things I'm looking for.
I'll send you. There's a great WhatsApp group for Pesach. You put it in whatever it is, and the rabbi answers kosher, not kosher for Pesach.
Interesting. Okay, it's less about Pesach, but it's about the whole year round, about things like.
To be in touch with him, he might have.
I would love that. Yeah. Yeah. I'm looking for somebody moderate, not too strict for me, where you know, I bring him something. I don't want someone who's going to make me crazy, you know, someone who's at my level. But yeah, I mean, above my level, clearly.
Okay, it's 5 o'clock. Thank you guys for sharing and learning with
Thank
me.
you so much. Amazing.
And who would like to learn of a Chol Hamoed? And who would like to skip next week and learn only after Passover?
I would love to continue if it's available. Only if you want to.
Great. I mean, I'm not going anywhere this year, so Chol Hamoed it is. So we will continue, and right, because normally I'd be like, I might be out touring with my kids. Not this year. So we will be here, and the party will continue, and so will the Bitachon, and I'll see you guys next week on Chol Hamoed Pesach, continuing to learn Shaar HaBitachon.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Chag Kasher v'Sameach to everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us for today's Healthy Trust class. Come back again to visit the Tower of Divine Protection every Sunday. To learn more about living a healthy life, body and soul, visit Lily Aronin at www.lilyaronin.com.